MMA is often viewed as a violent, bloody, and barbaric sport.
It's sort of like human cockfighting, in my view, or pit bull fighting. Guys are elbowing each other to the heads. Guys are kneeing each other.
While boxing is the sweet science, a technical, gentlemanly bout between two sportsmen.
You don't get it. It's a science. It's defense is as important as offense. Guys like you would never care about Willie Pep or Pernell Whitaker or Floyd Mayweather.
And on the face of it, it's kind of true. MMA undoubtedly has more superficial injuries like cuts, bruises, and broken bones. But what if I told you that when it comes to serious health issues like CTE, MMA is far safer than boxing? Whether it's multiple concussions, hundreds of unanswered headshots, or a toxic culture of going out on your shield, boxing and brain damage sadly go hand in hand. So this is the explanation of why MMA is a safer sport than boxing. In MMA, superficial damage is going to happen no matter who you are. Almost every UFC event will finish with a canvas covered in blood, multiple fighters heading to the hospital, and a few concussions here and there. No one's denying it's a brutal sport.
You know, Dan came to fight, he's a tough guy, he's on the rise. He really thought that he was going to get past me. He talked a lot of trash, like he was going to move forward and fight the champ, but I'm the champ, man.
But a lot of it is just graphic. Whether it's Cowboy Cerrone's swollen eye, Mike Berry's crushed nose, or Joanna's giant forehead hematoma, UFC fighters endure a lot of physical damage. There's blood, there's broken bones, there's forearm smashes to unconscious fighters like Dan Henderson on Michael Bisping. But give it a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, and they'll be completely healed. In boxing though, you rarely see any of the same damage. Grotesque cuts are rare, broken hands are uncommon, and fighters are given time to recover if they're knocked down. But while you don't see physical injuries nearly as often as MMA, what you do see more often is CTE, and in the most extreme cases, death.
It can start with memory loss, mood swings, and difficulty in concentration, developing into progressive dementia, even possible thoughts of suicide. But unlike Alzheimer's, CTE can also result in significant aggression and lack of impulse control. The big difference, symptoms tend to begin much earlier in life, closer to your 40s instead of your 60s. In both diseases, there's no known cure.
CTE is a brain condition caused by repeated head blows that causes memory loss, slurred speech, mood swings, and numerous other symptoms. It's incurable, and in many cases the symptoms won't appear for years or even decades after the damage is done. And it's this delayed onset combined with the fact that CTE can't be diagnosed until after death which makes it so dangerous. Back in the days, it was just known as being punch drunk, but in the 1920s, CTE was so closely linked with only boxing that its name even reflected that.
In the 20s, they termed this dementia pugilistica, word of the day, pugilist, which means boxer, but today we call this derangement CTE.
A quick Google search will list dozens of high-profile boxers, many of which were world champions, who suffered from CTE. CTE-induced dementia, and sadly died as early as their 50s. Probably the saddest yet a slightly unknown case of CTE comes from the Quarry brothers, a trio of siblings, all of whom were professional boxers in the 1960s and 70s.
Shavers is in trouble.
Jerry Quarry gave his heart to boxing, but he also gave his mind.
Winner by a knockout, Jerry Quarry.
This is Jerry Quarry today.
How do you feel these days, Jerry?
I feel I feature myself, but it's a little old, you know.
You feel old?
Yeah, I feel like an old man.
Two of them died in their 50s due to CTE-related illnesses, and the other brother, who's still alive today, has a serious case of Parkinson's disease. In their final years, they had to have their food cut up for them, wore diapers, had essentially no short-term memory, and needed near 24/7 care. Boxers who just 15 to 20 years prior were household names, physical specimens, and in the prime of their lives.
Quarry, Q-U-A-R-R-Y, a Q.
Okay, Jerry.
A Q, Q. Draw a circle and a line through it, remember?
What does that say about us? If we care about this guy as a sports hero, to let him end up like this.
Who says we cared about him? We may say, gee, I really like Jerry Quarry, whatever happened to him, but who really cared about him? We cared about him for the moment.
And while it was never confirmed because he declined an autopsy, the great Muhammad Ali was heavily suspected of suffering from CTE, despite being a renowned defensive boxer.
He had developed a neurological disease. He developed Parkinson's. But there's trauma-induced Parkinson's. A lot of people are trying to say, no, Ali got Parkinson's. It was a disease. Yeah, maybe. But you know who else has Parkinson's? Freddie Roach, the boxing coach, and he openly discusses the fact that it's trauma-induced. He got it from his long boxing career.
Of course, we have more boxers and more history to look at rather than MMA, which is a relatively new sport. But that said, MMA fighters aren't being diagnosed with dementia or memory loss and dying in their 50s, whereas the boxing fans of today could likely point to numerous retired fighters who are showing signs of CTE compared to their MMA counterparts. But if MMA is far more brutal than boxing, why are boxers suffering with all this trauma after their careers have finished? But with Ryan Garcia versus Rolando Romero going down on May 2nd, numerous UFC title fights on the horizon, and International Fight Week, now is the perfect time to get involved thanks to our latest partners, DraftKings Sportsbook. And there's nothing better than bragging to your friends after you correctly chose the winning fighter, call what round the fight finishes, and whether it was a TKO or submission. They're currently offering new customers a $200 bonus after they deposit and bet their first $5. That's a $200 bonus for just $5. Don't miss out on all the action this week at DraftKings. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use my promo code MARKFIGHTING and bet just $5 on any wager and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code MARKFIGHTING only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The big reason is multiple concussions and repeated punches to the head.
Repeated cranial impact has huge implications. The brain is bound by the same laws of physics as everything else, and thus will move until something stops it, namely the skull. This is called a concussion. And even a minor one has a serious effect on your brain box. If a smack is hard enough, the brain tissues can become deformed or permanently damaged. Even lesser subconcussions, when taken together, can affect the brain long term.
On average, boxers receive 150 to 200 head punches per 12-round fight. Of course, this number varies massively due to early finishes, one-sided fights, or just slow-paced action, but that number is huge. In contrast, the number in the UFC is around 60 to 100 shots per fight. But the reason why CTE is worse in boxing goes much deeper than the numbers. In boxing, a big problem is repeated concussions. Fighters can get knocked down, likely experience a concussion, yet get a 10 count and are able to continue.
Out cold, right hand to the chin, boom! Eyes roll behind their head, legs give out, they bounce off the canvas. They put a cold towel on him, they put some ice on his head, he gets up, he's like, I'm good. You want to keep going? Yeah, let's keep going. Let's keep going?
No.
You were just unconscious.
From there, they can receive hundreds of more shots to the head, then potentially get knocked out cold, all while already having a concussion. And that scenario isn't all that uncommon. Whereas in MMA, it's much more likely for a fighter to get knocked down or knocked out, receive a few more punches on the floor, and the referee will jump in to stop the action. It looks a lot more brutal to see an unconscious fighter get hit, but in terms of brain damage, it's nothing compared to what can happen to a boxer.
Boxing is more dangerous than MMA. Oh, how could you say that when they're only boxing and they're using their hands and they jump on you and they hit you on the ground when you fall? I said, I will argue with you that that's safer than you knocking me out. Bang! My body, which has been trained my whole life to get up, gets up, they count to 8 or 9, and they say go back and fight more. When I'm still concussed.
And when talking about punches, we know that not all punches are created equally. Of course, there's exceptions to the rule, but 9 times out of 10, a boxer is far more powerful and accurate with their punches than a UFC fighter would be. Not only is there extra power, but also the gloves make the impact far worse in terms of potential brain trauma. You may think a smaller glove would equal less protection, but it's not the case. According to a study from Boston University CTE Center, UFC gloves lead to more surface damage and knockouts when compared to boxing gloves, but the impact on the brain is far lower. Boxing gloves and their padding have this giant thudding effect that makes a fighter's brain move inside their heads, which is the main driving factor towards CTE.
The weight on the end of the glove actually creates more momentum and force, and it's actually a bigger impact zone, so it causes more blunt trauma over the head versus the more precise, smaller gloves.
And a bigger glove means boxers can go for broke with no fear of their hands breaking, whereas UFC fighters have to be a little more tentative when throwing their full power at an opponent.
You really can't tee off on someone the way you can with boxing gloves. With boxing gloves, you almost can have no concern with whether or not you're going to hit a forehead or you're going to hit an elbow, unless you have small hands or weak hands. Like it's much more rare that boxers break their hands than MMA fighters. But even MMA fighters, I think they have an unrealistic amount of protection on their hands, and it's just to protect their hands.
And speaking about the differences in the sports, the rules, training styles, and even the culture has had huge implications on the damage their athletes have taken over the years. In MMA, obviously the sport is much more varied. Whether it's wrestling, submissions, or even low kicking, every fight will have huge chunks where the fighters can't even strike each other to the head. They don't even stand at boxing range most of the time anyway because of all the other threats. And if things are looking a bit one-sided, the other fighter always has the option to at least try and take their opponent down and minimize the damage that way. Whereas in boxing, there's no escape whatsoever.
No other options to preserve yourself, to protect yourself. So if you get hit in a UFC fight, you can clinch. You can try to take the fight to the ground. You get options. Yeah. Also, you don't get allowed to get knocked down and then get back up. When you get knocked down, you're concussed. And generally, if a guy's really hurt, they could be finished on the ground and the fight's over. If it's boxing, you have 10 seconds to get up. You get up, your head kind of clears, but you're still in real bad trouble, and then you can kind of run away and survive until the bell rings. Yeah. They're only 3-minute rounds, and then you start again. So you're getting repeated punishment to the head.
Aside from a little clinch that immediately gets broken up, you're standing toe-to-toe with your opponent, throwing mostly headshots at one another. Fighters can't ride out around in top position like they can MMA. In boxing, it's 36 minutes of repeated head trauma, unless there's the finish, which almost certainly guarantees a concussion anyway. In MMA, it's mostly 15-minute fights with limited amounts of striking due to the sport's variation, and that variation carries over to the training approaches of both sports. MMA fighters will have workouts where they focus on their wrestling, their jiu-jitsu, their low kicks, and so much more. All days where there's no punches or kicks thrown to the head whatsoever, and when they do spar, it's often not at 100% power, and the more dangerous techniques like head kicks or elbows aren't allowed due to the danger they pose. There's much more of a critical approach to sparring in MMA than there is in boxing. In fact, a lot of elite UFC fighters have opted out of sparring at times throughout their careers because the conversation around CTE is so prominent.
You don't spar anymore? That's real?
Yeah, I don't spar. We do movement sparring now.
But it's never like...
you ever watch Thai spar?
No.
Like Thai people? Watch how they spar. It's real like speed, but it's not power. You know what I mean? Like,
but are you touching each other?
Yeah. We're touching each other here and there.
While boxing, on the other hand, is extremely focused on sparring. Perhaps it's the hangover of being an older sport, but boxing has a strong do-or-die culture where only the toughest survive. Fighters never give up. They never admit defeat, and they grit your teeth and get on with it.
It's a rough man's game. It's like a brutal game. You want to stay strong. You want to show like you're not hurt. You're a big macho guy. No. But that's how you think when you're younger.
MMA fighters definitely have that mentality, but they play spar a lot, tap out often, and have a culture of really taking care of your training partners. And this difference in mentality can be seen on fight night too. In boxing, fighters go out on their shield no matter what. Despite numerous knockdowns and one fighter showing no signs of winning, the cornermen will almost never throw the towel in to save their athlete.
He's pointing to his corner. He's pointing to Comey's corner and saying, you want me to give him more, or do you want to stop this?
When Anthony Joshua lost to Andy Ruiz Jr., he all but certainly received a concussion early in the fight. And even though his cornermen knew their fighter was compromised and that Joshua was complaining something was wrong, they never considered stopping the action.
He just got concussed in the third round. Didn't really recover. Doesn't remember a great deal from that third round. He's surprised, actually, that he went 4 rounds in the condition he was in, because he said, I couldn't stand up. I was fatigued, didn't really know where I was, but he tried. He got up 4 times, so he's good.
Maybe it's the old school mentality, knowing you always have a puncher's chance, or fear of how a loss in boxing can affect your career more than MMA. But boxers receive very little protection once a fight starts. And while we're not saying Joshua's team definitely should have stopped the fight, it's more the proof of boxers fighting while severely hurt. MMA is also far from perfect in this regard, but it's not uncommon to see independent doctors step in and stop a fight. Usually it's due to bad cuts or eye pokes, but at least there are some protocols in place. It's a similar story with referees too. They could probably do a better job, but refs can and have stopped fights that have begun to look a little too one-sided. But in boxing, those same situations usually end with a fighter getting dropped too many times or making it to the final bell with everyone praising them for their toughness. So whether it's the difference in the sport, an old school versus new breed culture, or a combination of everything, it's undeniable that boxing is far more dangerous when it comes to CTE. And speaking of dangerous, a technique that goes under the radar but may be MMA's most effective strike is the calf kick. It definitely doesn't cause CTE, but it can leave a fighter unable to walk altogether in a flash. So if you'd like to learn more about the calf kick in MMA, check out our deep dive video here.